Hello and welcome. My name is Kate Marrand. I work at the DC Department of Small and Local Business Development. We are very excited today to have several presenters from DOEE and the DC Sustainable Energy Utility to talk about DC's Building Energy Performance Standards. This session follows on a session that we did last week on Benchmarking 101, and now this is BEPS 101. These two sessions together really help to outline some of the amazing things that the District of Columbia is doing in order to reduce energy use and to combat climate change. And one of the things that is so important about this is the number of skilled CVEs and workers that we need in the district to be able to fulfill all of these requirements for buildings that are coming in across the city. And so within that, these are great opportunities for CVEs and CVE eligible businesses, as well as people who are looking to be employed by those businesses to learn more about this. There will be some information about training that is coming up as well. So if you aren't trained in these areas, there may be ways to get trained in these areas. But I want to turn things right over to Joanna Saunders from the Department of Energy and the Environment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kate. And hi, everyone. Welcome to the Building Energy Performance Standards 101 overview. My name is Joanna Saunders. I'm a program analyst at the District Department of Energy and Environment in the Building Performance and Enforcement branch. And today we're going to be going over the basics of the Building Energy Performance Standards, or BEPS is how I'll refer to them moving forward, so that you all have the context to speak with building owners or other contractors who might be seeking assistance in reducing their energy consumption and complying with the performance standards. So I covered this a bit last year, but also just want to reiterate a bit kind of context setting why we're talking about building performance standards. So the district has a vision to make DC the most healthiest, greenest, most livable city in the country. And here at the Department of Energy and Environment, we are really focusing in on that greenest or most sustainable city part. So, so what does that look like? To envision the sustainable DC vision, we have developed a sustainable DC plan, which is the overarching plan that commits the district to carbon neutrality by 2050. And nestled within the sustainable DC plan, which focuses on everything from our rivers to our air quality, to our buildings, to renewable energy, there's these two big pieces: Climate Ready DC and Clean Energy DC. Climate Ready DC focuses on climate adaptation, which is to say we're already experiencing the impacts of climate change. How do we most effectively adapt to those changes? And then Clean Energy DC focuses on the climate mitigation piece, wherein we are actually trying to reduce our energy consumption, reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, and increase our renewable energy capacity. And this is all to drive us towards this zero carbon by 2050 goal. So focusing in even more, why do we care so much about energy consumption and specifically building energy use? So this chart is taken from a modeling that we did as part of the Clean Energy DC plan. And it shows that nearly 75% of DC's greenhouse gas emissions come from existing buildings. So that's these three green shades here in the pie chart. This is a significantly higher proportion than pretty much any other city in the US. And that's mostly because DC does not have a large industrial sector or, and has a stronger transit mode split than other cities. It doesn't mean that our buildings are any worse than other cities. It doesn't mean that we just have the poorest performers. It simply means that we don't have a lot of other industry. So most of our energy consumption in the city is coming from our buildings, to heat them, to cool them, just to operate them. And so I think this pie chart does a good job of demonstrating the importance of building efficiency as a cornerstone of any climate action plan, because we really cannot talk about carbon neutrality without addressing building energy performance. And this slide should also look familiar from last year. So knowing that we have a huge chunk of our emissions coming from buildings, we have this commitment to be zero carbon by 2050. How do we actually implement policies to get us there? So the big landslide legislation that kicks this all off is the Clean Energy DC Omnibus Amendment Act of 2018, which has impacts for the energy benchmarking, which we covered last week. But most importantly, it established the Building Energy Performance Standards, which we'll go into more later. Again, just want to quickly recap. I know I gave a much more detailed overview last week, but this is still, again, foundational to the Building Energy Performance Standards is energy benchmarking. Data is due every year on April 1st for the previous calendar year. All privately owned buildings over 50,000 square feet and publicly owned buildings over 10,000 square feet have been covered for almost a decade now. This year, those buildings 25,000 square feet and above are going to be reporting for the first time with their calendar year 2021 data. And that third-party data verification piece that we focused in on is going to start in 2024 with calendar year 2023 data. Okay, so Building Energy Performance Standard, what is it? It is a minimum threshold for energy performance that will be no lower than the local median Energy Star score by property type or equivalent metric. So that is to say, we're looking at all of the buildings in the district that are covered, which right now are the ones that are over 50,000 square feet and the public ones over 10,000 square feet, breaking them into property groups and determining a median Energy Star score or equivalent metric. So it might be energy use intensity if a property type can't get an Energy Star score, and seeing which buildings perform above that standard or below that standard. These standards are set every 6 years, and in this first BEPS period, there's a 1-year adjustment due to COVID. So the idea is we're in this first BEPS period now, and then once that one's over, the standards are going to be reset. We'll have the second period, third period, fourth period, etc., seemingly on forever until all of our buildings are completely high performing, zero emission. That's the end goal. Okay, so like I mentioned, who does BEPS apply to? Similar to the benchmarking requirements, the BEPS are going to ratchet down in square footage over time. And so eventually all buildings, both private and DC owned buildings over 10,000 square feet are going to be covered by BEPS. But right now in this BEPS period 1, which is what we're in currently, it's all private buildings over 50,000 square feet and all publicly owned DC buildings over 10,000 square feet. In the next BEPS period, because we're now going to have all of those buildings over 25,000 square feet benchmarking, they will then be included, and then eventually all the way down to 10,000 square feet just across the board. This is an example of what the standards actually look like for the first BEPS period. So there's almost 40 different property types within buildings that are subject to BEPS. However, the bolded property types up here, these 4 on top, represents over 80% of covered buildings. So that is to say we have a large variety of buildings in DC, about 40. However, the vast majority fall into just 4 categories. Most property types that benchmark are measured in Energy Star score and compared to like buildings at the local level rather than the national level. So whenever possible, buildings are evaluated against their similar property types within the district, because that is a more fair example of how buildings, should be compared as compared to, seeing what a building here in DC looks like compared to one in the Midwest or California. However, there are some cases in which there's less than 10 buildings in a specific property type. And at that point, we will need to use the national median because there's just not a large enough data sample to accurately compare those buildings. But the good news is, like I said, 80% of buildings that are covered by BEPS fall into these 4 categories. All 4 of these categories can receive an Energy Star score and also are compared at the local median. So the large majority of our buildings that are subject to BEPS are being compared to other local buildings. Okay, so when we're talking about BEPS, it's important to understand the different terms we use. And I know that in government, we are guilty of using a lot of jargon, so we really want to make sure that it's clear what we mean by each of these phrases. So property types. This is your portfolio manager calculated property use type. And this is based on the benchmarking report that is submitted to DOEE. So a property type might be multifamily, office, K-12, medical office, senior living community. It's whatever the main property use for that building is. The metric, it refers to the energy metric by which each of the property types is evaluated. So in a lot of cases, this is the Energy Star score. And those are, again, for those properties that can receive an Energy Star score. Their metric is their score. For properties that cannot receive an Energy Star score, their metric is source EUI, which we'll get into in a second. The standard refers to the threshold of energy performance that the buildings are evaluated against. And as I mentioned, for most property types, the standard is set at the local median. And those property types with less than 10 local buildings, the standard will be set at the national median. So to delve even deeper, this slide shows an overview of the primary metrics that we use for BEPS. And remember, metrics refers to the actual energy metric by which we're evaluating properties. So the first one is Energy Star score. This is a number established by the US EPA that allows for a comparison of energy use of a property with similar properties nationwide. This is very important because most of our buildings receive an Energy Star score. The other is source energy use intensity, which is the total amount of raw fuel that is required to operate a building divided by the building's gross floor area. And that gross floor area is defined by a portfolio manager in the energy benchmarking report. And so while we use both of these, 95% of DC's buildings over 50,000 square feet are eligible for an Energy Star score and will use that local median score. This slide is a good overview of what the process looks like of how a building is evaluated and determined whether or not it meets the BEPS. So every building starts with benchmarking. They're benchmarking for at least a year or two before. All of our buildings covered by BEPS have been covered for about 8 or 9 years now, so we've got many years worth of data. In the first BEPS period, the benchmarking report that was used to determine whether or not buildings meet the BEPS was the calendar year 2019 report. So the owner benchmarked their building with their calendar year 2019 data. DOEE established the standards, and we use that based on the data we receive. We look at how buildings perform, we set the median standards, and then the buildings are evaluated whether or not they are above or below. So how does that happen? If a building is eligible to receive an Energy Star score, which most are, and the 2019 Energy Star score is above the standard for its property type, then the building meets the BEPS. No action is needed until the next period when the building will be evaluated again. However, if the Energy Star score is below the standard, a building enters a compliance cycle. And this occurs again if the building cannot receive an Energy Star score. And so if the 2019 source EUI is lower than the standard for its property type, it meets the BEPS and no further action is needed until it's evaluated again. However, if the source EUI is greater than the standard, then the building enters a compliance cycle. I know that's a little bit confusing, but basically, Energy Star score, you want to be above the standard. Source EUI, you want to be below the standard, because that means that you meet the BEPS and you don't have to take action. Your building is an efficient performer and is good to go for now. However, I do want to reiterate that because we expect to have multiple BEPS periods, no building is quote unquote safe, in that we don't know what the standards are going to look like moving forward. We only can anticipate that it's going to get higher as buildings become more efficient. So a good way to understand this is to use some examples. So let's walk through that process that was just described to determine if a building is subject to the BEPS or not. So let's say you have a multifamily building that's 150,000 square feet. First question is, does BEPS 1 apply? yes, your building is privately owned and it's over 50,000 square feet, which means it is covered. So let's see if it meets the performance standard. My Energy Star score was a 72. The BEPS for my property type was an Energy Star score of a 66. If you can recall from this chart right here, we can see multifamily housing, they use an Energy Star score as their metric, and the standard was set at 66, which means that's the median, is a 66 for multifamily. This building received an Energy Star score of 72, which means that it's above the standard, or excuse me, above the median, and therefore meets the standard. So what do they need to do? Nothing right now, but I should look ahead to BEPS 2 and make sure my building continues to meet the standard, because who knows, maybe in the next BEPS period, the median will be a 74 and suddenly the building is below the standard. Okay, let's look at another example. This is a multifamily building that's 80,000 square feet. Does BEPS 1 apply? Yes, the building's over 50,000 square feet. Therefore, it's covered by the BEPS program. Energy Star score was a 40. 40 is below the median of 66, so the building does not meet the standard. What does that mean? What do I need to do to comply? Well, you have a number of options. Let's learn a little bit more about what those options are. So first, if a building enters into a compliance cycle, if they do not meet the standard, they are placed onto a 5-year compliance cycle, and the building owner has until the end of that cycle to bring their building into compliance. Normally, these compliance cycles are 5 years. However, due to the COVID-19 public health emergency, DOE granted a 1-year delay in compliance. So it extends the compliance cycle from 5 years to 6 years to give property owners more time to come into compliance due to delays or burdens that occurred due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So almost every building subject to BEPS is just automatically placed on a 6-year cycle for cycle 1. Some buildings have the option to stick to the 5-year cycle if they choose, but we're assuming most buildings are going to take this 6-year compliance option. So if your building is placed on a compliance cycle, what do you need to do to comply? So there are 4 pathways that a building can select from once they're placed on a compliance cycle. The first is the performance pathway, and this is kind of the most straightforward in that all it does is require buildings to reduce their site energy use intensity by 20%. This provides the ultimate flexibility to make improvements any way a building owner might see fit, as long as they achieve the 20% savings. So this is very much, you can do what you want. You can invest however much money you want. You can change out whatever, operating systems at the building, as long as you achieve at least a 20% reduction in your site EUI. That's what we're looking at. The second option is the standard target pathway. This is a pathway where buildings must demonstrate that their building meets the standards for their property type at the end of a compliance cycle. So this is only available for buildings where the local median is higher than the national median. So what that means is, let's say we have an office building which has a local median Energy Star of 71. The national median is a 50, so office buildings are eligible. All of the Energy Star scores are that 1 to 100 score. That's a national score where 100 means you're in the top 100 percentile of performers in the building, in the nation. 50 means that you are at the median of similar buildings. 1 meaning you're in the poorest performers. And so when we're looking at our office buildings in the district, we're performing a lot higher than the national average. So buildings that are in these, what we call high performance property groups, are eligible to take the standard target pathway. And what they would have to do is just demonstrate that they achieve the standard for their property type at the end of the compliance cycle. So if an office building has a score of 60, then it would need to demonstrate that it achieves an Energy Star score of 71 by the end of the compliance cycle. On the flip side, K-12 schools, their local Energy Star score is 36. They're performing worse than the national median, so they are not eligible to take the standard target pathway. The third option is the prescriptive pathway, and this requires building owners to implement cost-effective efficiency measures that are approved by DOEE to reduce energy consumption at their building. It is a pathway that has 4 phases. It starts with an energy audit. Based on that energy audit, the building owner will propose energy efficiency measures that are targeted to save at least 25% of energy consumption. Phase 3 is to actually implement those energy efficiency measures, and phase 4 is testing them to make sure that they were installed properly and that they're actually functioning in the way that they were identified to. Compliance with this pathway is demonstrated by a building owner implementing those identified energy efficiency measures. And we have said that you have to target a 25% savings because there is a disconnect between estimated and actual savings. And this built-in 25% as compared to 20% helps ensure that buildings achieve comparable savings to the performance pathway, but it also provides a degree of certainty of compliance at the end of cycle, regardless of savings. So this is a way to ensure that whatever money you're putting in to implement these energy efficiency measures are going to guarantee you compliance as long as they meet all of the requirements of these phases. Obviously, we're hoping that you've identified these energy efficiency measures and will achieve at least a 20% reduction, but this does provide a little bit more certainty on the off chance that you don't. The final pathway is the alternative compliance pathway, which is separate from the previous 3, what we call principal pathways. This ACP option pathway allows building owners to propose their own pathway, which DOEE will review and approve or decline. It's designed to address special circumstances and also provides an opportunity for flexibility and an opportunity for buildings who want to pursue a deep energy retrofit or other innovative ideas that don't necessarily fit into the confines of the previous 3 pathways. In our guidebook, which is a longer, much more detailed dive into the building energy performance standards and all the pathways, we have laid out some pre-approved pathway options. So we have already said, these are some alternative compliance pathways options that you could select from, such as an extended deep energy retrofit. So let's say you really want to go for it and reduce energy consumption by like 40% rather than 20%, but that's going to take a lot longer. There might be an option for you. Like I said, buildings are also allowed to propose their own, but they are subject to review and approval by DOEE. All right, so this slide does a good job of just showing how the BEPS fits in with benchmarking and what this kind of 6-year period looks like. So every year there's a benchmarking requirement. The first year is when the BEPS are set, and they're set for every 6 years. Within those 6 years, there's the 5-year compliance cycle, 6 years with the COVID delay for this first cycle. And then 1 year for performance reporting and evaluation, where essentially we're collecting data for 5 years, and then we're looking at all of it and analyzing it to determine whether or not buildings did in fact come into compliance. This also shows where those third-party data verification years will come in. So for the BEPS cycle, it'll be, in the 2nd year and the 5th year. And this was specifically designed so that the year that's being evaluated for whether or not buildings came into compliance on their compliance cycle, we're making sure that that data has been third-party verified, so we feel extra confident that it is complete and accurate and representative of how the building actually operated. And then, like I said, every year there is still this annual benchmarking requirement on top of your BEPS requirements, depending on if you're on a specific cycle and what your what your specific requirements may be depending on the pathway that's been selected. The final thing I want to highlight is what happens if you don't come into compliance. So failure to come into compliance with the BEPS leads to an alternative compliance penalty. And the penalty is based on the gross floor area of your building. And that gross floor area comes from the benchmarking report submitted in Portfolio Manager. It is also adjusted proportionally based on the actual performance relative to its pathway target. So what that means is we are going to only penalize buildings for the amount of savings that they didn't achieve. So we have an example here where building A is 100,000 square feet and it doesn't meet the BEPS for the first BEPS period. That means at max, if they achieve no savings, we could penalize that building at $10 per square foot times the 100,000 square feet of the building for a total fine of $1 million. Let's say this building selects the performance pathway on April 1st of 2023, which is when pathway selections are due. At the end of the compliance cycle, Building A reports a site EUI that is 10% lower than its baseline performance. It was tasked with lowering its site EUI by 20%, but it only achieved a 10% savings. That means the maximum penalty is adjusted by 50% because it only achieved half of its required savings for a total penalty of $500,000. So that's a simple example, but this is to demonstrate that, there are some pretty hefty penalties associated with not coming into compliance with the building energy performance standards. And also, we want to show that coming into compliance and investing in energy efficiency measures is probably going to be the more cost-effective measure rather than paying this alternative compliance penalty. Obviously, we want all of our buildings to be in compliance and to reduce their energy consumption in the same way that we want all of our buildings to submit their benchmarking reports on time, completely and accurately. But of course, there always needs to be the flip side of that to make sure there's extra incentive. The last thing that I'm going to talk about is the Affordable Housing Retrofit Accelerator, which is a brand new program that was launched at the end of last year and is a partnership between the Department of Energy and Environment, the DC Sustainable Energy Utility, and the DC Green Bank. It is first of its kind and was developed in response to our own concerns about affordable housing being able to make the necessary investments to come into compliance if they don't meet the BEPS. So this program, it was specifically designed to help building owners comply with BEPS by providing financial and technical resources to improve energy efficiency of the district's affordable housing buildings. So for buildings that are eligible, there is financial assistance available for energy audits, for retro commissioning, for installation of new energy efficient building equipment, and low cost construction loans for deeper energy retrofits. The Retrofit Accelerator also provides one-on-one technical guidance. So it's designed to help building owners understand all the regulatory requirements of BEPS and the deadlines, because we know that it's a lot of information. It also will help with uncovering energy saving opportunities in your building, developing a pathway and action plan to improve energy performance, so actually helping you select that compliance pathway and how you're going to achieve the required savings of that pathway, and also guidance on cutting energy costs, running your building more efficiently, and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So buildings that are eligible for the Affordable Housing Retrofit Accelerator are specifically multifamily buildings that are over 50,000 square feet and do not meet the 2021 BEPS, which means that their Energy Star score was below a 66 in 2019, because 66 is the standard for multifamily properties. And most importantly, it must meet the definition of affordable housing, which we have defined as buildings that are primarily residential and contain 5 or more dwelling units where use restrictions or other covenants require that at least 50% of all the building's units are occupied by households that have an income of less than or equal to 80% of the area median income, or if the owner can demonstrate that at least 50% of the units rent at levels that are affordable to households with incomes of less than or equal to 80% of the area median income. So this is all to say that we have this new program. Believe that my colleagues over at the SEU are going to provide some more information on how specifically you all can get involved, but you can also learn more on your own by going to the DCSEU's website on their Affordable Housing Retrofit Accelerator page. We provide a lot more information, go over those eligibility requirements, and you can see or just learn more about the program, generally speaking. And this just provides a snapshot of what we expect the timeline to look like. So we launched the Accelerator at the end of last year. Our application due date for buildings passed this past Friday, but as long as there is funding available, applications will still be considered on a rolling basis. The plan is to start implementation as soon as possible, provide that guidance for pathway selection for BEPS and completing energy audits and actually doing installations through the end of the year. And then at the end of the fiscal year, start to look towards fiscal year 2023. And hopefully we have additional funding to continue those projects into FY 2023, which is the hope right now. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark and Rick from the DCSEU to talk more about those training and contracting opportunities.
Thank you, Joanna, and thank you, Kate, for having us here today. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you as well to those joining in virtually in the audience and those tuning into the recording afterward. My name is Mark Bryan. I'm the Community Impact Manager at the DC Sustainable Energy Utility. I'll be joined shortly by Rick Fleury, our Trade Ally Manager. We're going to be talking about training and contracting opportunities that exist currently and in the future that underlie the building energy performance standard. Next slide, please. For a bit of background, our program, this is our capacity building program, which we colloquially call Train Green, was actually created as part of the Clean Energy Omnibus Act that created the BEPS law in 2018, where with the title of Sustainable Energy Infrastructure Capacity Building Pipeline Program. We use the term Train Green, so folks don't have to use that acronym repeatedly. However, this is really a foresight in terms of the lawmakers and Department of Energy and the Environment in creating a funded program to provide all of the training needed for CBEs and CBE eligible firms to participate in this new market that's developed. And when I say new market, I'm really sort of referring to what I think of as the market transformation that's created by the Clean Energy Omnibus Bill in combination with the benchmarking law that was already in place and enhanced under the Clean Energy Omnibus Bill. The Building Energy Performance Standard is going to create, I would say conservatively, hundreds of millions of dollars in business opportunities for service providers to DC buildings that are looking to comply with the benchmarking laws and the Building Energy Performance Standard for the foreseeable future. There's going to be an increasing number of buildings over the next 10 to 15 years that are going to have to comply, and that's going to really sort of double and triple the demand for these services as more and more small buildings get involved in compliance. I can tell you this is just the start. And so companies, particularly CBEs and CBE eligible firms that are willing to learn and start specializing to meet those needs are going to have an endless market opportunities in DC over the next few years. I can tell folks in the audience that we at the DCSEU hear from a lot of companies outside the DC market as well as outside the US that are thinking about getting involved in providing services to building owners. So this is really market transformation happening in the District of Columbia. Um, I won't go into any details about the DCSU's energy efficiency rebates and programs. We are really focusing on training opportunities. Those who are interested in everything that DCSU has to offer, terms of rebates, and other financial incentive programs, can check us out at www.dcsu.com. For now, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the training opportunities that we have to get CBEs into position to provide those services. Next slide, please. We've really scaled up this program. We're in year 3 of it now. Last year, even in the virtual space, we were able to provide services to 125 CBE or district-based businesses, and 136 of our registrants were actually associated directly with CBEs. Only 67 of our 217 total registrants were from the district, so that shows that we do have participation from folks outside of the district that are also working on projects in the district. 19 different courses offered, and we hope to repeat that coming soon as we launch our 3rd year of programming in 2022. Next slide, please. Because we have increasing interest, we have criteria that are laid out that folks will have to fill out a new program registration form and be clear to participate. First and foremost, for our tiers of criteria are district residents who are working at district CBEs or CBE eligible firms. We say CBE eligible because we know some folks are looking to start businesses or have businesses and are looking to get into these markets. So we do provide that even if you're not official CBE yet. We hope you'll become one and take advantage of all those preferential contracting opportunities. But if you are not a CBE or eligible, Tier 2 has district residents who are working on projects outside the districts, or even non-residents that are working for CBEs in the district. And then Tier 3, we actually have non-residents and businesses in the greater DMV metro area that are working on projects in the DC area. So we're servicing not just the DC market, but the broader DMV market that is actively participating in the district. Next slide, please. I want to give folks a sense of the coursework of where it was and where it's going. We have an RFP that's actually launched and open now. I'll talk a little bit about that in a second, but on the left, you'll see the set of courses that we've had in the past, a range of courses, a lot of it focused on energy efficiency, lots of opportunities around energy auditing, building operations and maintenance, but we also provide broader insights into different aspects of sustainability, health and wellness, and renewables that are very active in the district market and part of industry best practices. We have an RFP open. We just passed last week the first deadline. However, we will be accepting applications on a rolling basis. I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit further. For now, I want to go into a little bit how we are structuring the program over the next 5 years of service delivery. Slide, please. This crowded slide really really gives you a sense of how we're starting to group the new recommended pathways and levels so that we can provide opportunities for individuals that are just looking to get into this industry to start at the introductory course level and get their 101 courses, as well as folks that are mid-career and advanced career to sort of add skills to their portfolio or add new service provision opportunities at their CBE or CBE eligible firms. I'll spend a little bit of time talking about the pathways here. I think the energy efficiency pathway, first and foremost, is going to have a lot of skill sets that building owners are going to need, particularly in the area of benchmarking and energy audits in the context of the Building Energy Performance Standard. I can tell you that the DCSEU will be supporting energy audits, particularly ASHRAE Level 2 audits. And I think Rick is going to put a little bit more background behind that in his section of the presentation, but there will be hundreds, if not thousands, of buildings that need these kinds of audits in the foreseeable future. In advanced coursework, we have really designed, for folks that have already some credentialing, some criteria, 3 to 5 years worth of experience. Those courses generally provide some kind of certification or credential and have prerequisites that are generally found in the basic level. In terms of sustainability, we know, the clean energy is important, but there's other aspects of the built environment that are also very important to building owners and occupants, including health and wellness. So we have basic and advanced courses that really deal with all of those aspects of the built environment, including focusing on human health and well-being via the LEED Green Associate, LEED AP, O&M, as well as the Fitwell Ambassador on the basic level, and the Well AP on advanced sustainability. I tell you, those are two sought-after credentials, particularly for the commercial real estate sector. Building operations, this is a fundamental need for many different types of buildings across the district. And I would say the needs of building owners are going to be evolving with the Building Energy Performance Standard, so that building operations are going to start merging with energy efficiency, and what used to be a one-off project will hopefully become part of regular building operations and maintenance practice. So we have courses here that are really focused a little bit more on the hands-on side of things, and explore whole building automation, maintenance, as well as green property management credentials. On the advanced side of building operations, we are providing for small businesses that are growing. So we'll have crew management, as well as whole building systems, EMIS, for the more advanced customers, or helping to bring your older building customers into the modern age with BAS and EMIS systems. We will have, I think probably the most hands-on category is going to be HVAC, both in terms of basic operations and maintenance, as well as advanced coursework around building automation systems. And as we see more advanced systems out there, refrigerant and leak management and repair, as well as natural refrigeration as the standards around that change. I could also see hands-on courses around heat pumps being added to this category as that technology becomes more and more interesting and valuable in the DC market. And then finally, we have solar. We'll probably add some renewables in the future if geothermal becomes of an interest. But for now, the district has a huge push around solar through the Solar for All program. And we offer courses around solar installation, solar safety, and in the future, hopefully around solar financing as well. Next slide, please. I've covered this a little bit. I think what I really wanted to focus on here is that we will have new pathways, and at each level of these pathways, we're going to provide other certifications or certifications for completion, so that people can really use this as a workforce development opportunity to get them ready to join the workforce or build their skill sets at the advanced level. Next slide, please. We do have an open call again for courses, particularly introductory courses, either English or Spanish. We are trying to work more closely with the Spanish-speaking segment of the contracting and subcontracting communities. We know a significant portion of our building engineering staff in the city are Spanish speakers, so we want to make these courses available to those folks as well, and are still looking for service providers in those areas. Next slide, please. I talked already about detail about these pathways. What I want to note here is that we're still looking for courses and instructors, and submissions don't necessarily have to follow the pathways directly, but can fit in any of the different levels or pathways themselves. Next slide, please. Although a lot of these dates have passed already, I do want to mention, you'll see at the bottom of the slides, that we will be evaluating submissions on a rolling basis, and we will be adding new training opportunities and new course requirements or course needs, I think, to the RFP over time. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Rick Fleury, to talk about other opportunities we have around the Building Energy Performance Standard.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining this presentation. What I'm going to cover is our current list of requests for qualifications from our contracting base for various services across the portfolio for the DCSU. However, you've heard from Joanna and Mark that there's going to be a huge emphasis around the building energy performance stuff in general around especially the affordable housing retrofit accelerator, and there's a few opportunities that you all can take advantage of in those channels in order to create either existing relationship strengthening or create new business development opportunities. Next slide, please. Currently, we have 6 requests for qualifications. I'm not going to go into detail on every single one. What I'm going to call out are 2 in particular that are directly tied into not only the retrofit accelerator work in affordable housing, but other services that the DCSU provides through its traditional programming. I'm going to specifically call out attachment B and attachment D in this presentation. Before we go to the next slide, I would like to call out the specific skill sets that we are looking for, but are not all encompassing inclusive. We are typically looking in the category B, for general contractors, electricians, HVAC, with ideally some refrigeration background and training. We're looking for a mechanical, automation controls specialists, and building envelope specialists as well for attachment B. And attachment B, for reference throughout this, is really the install portion of the work that's identified through attachment D. And attachment D is really designed around meeting that ASHRAE level 2 auditing requirements, not only for certain pathways within the BEPS, but also over the course of the next 5 years, we want to have a stable of contractors that we can avail ourselves to in other programs and services the DCSU is considering. That doing those deeper dives across the portfolio is certainly going to pay dividends not only for the contractor, the DCSU, but the district in general. And folks that were, as I said, not limited to, professional engineers, certified engine managers, BPI multifamily building specialists are kind of some key examples of skill sets that we're looking into. And some of those, especially around the certified engine manager, BPI type work, Mark had mentioned that there's training opportunities that can be availed to folks that want to take advantage of the Train Green program. Anticipated work for 2022 is we are targeting approximately 60 to 100 multifamily buildings in the Affordable Housing Retrofit Accelerator program. And in that regard, works there, and we are looking for some talented folks that want to enroll as potential service providers in this effort. Next slide, please. Once again, certainly you can see more into the details on the website. I put the link in about contracting opportunities. It's under the functional category of FY22 Service Providers RFQ. For sake of time, I'm going to defer that you check that out. Really what we're looking for in the general sense is install contractors that can do the work of installing the energy efficiency measures that are identified either through their own efforts or through the efforts of the ASHRAE auditing process, specifically around the Affordable Housing Retrofit Accelerator work. Next slide. And this is just really covering in the scopes that we're looking for requests for qualifications. A high emphasis this year is going to be around the ASHRAE Level 2 auditing service. However, we are asking folks to submit in their pricing proposals when they do submit pricing for what's considered ASHRAE Level 1 audits, all the way up to the really, really deep dive analysis of an ASHRAE Level 3 audit. And there's slight nuances, but the core amount of work that I mentioned previously of the 60 to 100 buildings will be around the Category 2 level of audit for FY22. Next slide, please. Submitting potential bids to the web portal. What if you are existing provider that you've already created an account? You can skip the first box, but you're going to want to go to the portal.dcsu.com, look for the functional categories that you're wanting to put in bid proposals, and any questions around either existing relationships or new providers. If you have any specific questions, you can request a copy of the DCSU solicitation guide by emailing proposals@dcsu.com. However, if you're a new bidder, you need to request an account, a user account, so we can set you up with a login and a unique password for submitting stuff to the portal. It typically takes 2 business days. We strive to get it done quicker, but in a virtual environment, I can't go hound folks in person. So we strive to get the login, the password to you in 2 business days. So my encouraging factor is when you want to submit, I would suggest getting the login and the password early. And if you do forget your password, you can also email proposals@dcsu.com, and we can help facilitate resetting your password if you forget it. The responses that are not in required format, they're not complete, or if there is a specific submittal deadline, they may be disqualified. However, as Mark mentioned in the Train Green effort, it's on applications are being accepted on a rolling basis, and the RFQ, the 6 functional current categories that we're soliciting work for, those are on a rolling basis as well. They'll be open for the entire contract period of the DCSU for basically the next 4.5 years at this point. However, building stables early entry certainly gets you a greater opportunity through an RFQ. There is no guarantee of work, so getting in the submissions and being qualified to be able to provide service puts you on a timeline in which when work comes in through one of the various efforts that require, for instance, an ASHRAE audit or a direct service type relationship, early and often is my recommendation to folks in submitting for potential delivery of the work. Next slide, please. I also want to encourage you to sign up for our contractor updates. You can do that through the hyperlink once you receive the slide deck at dcsu.com/contractor updates. That'll put you on our trades list, in which we send out on a regular basis any updates that we're having for the market in general in regards to rebates. We also do tech talks at least 3 times a year around certain technologies that the market may be interested in and what we may be pushing for innovation over the next 5 years. In addition to that, I want to encourage you all to use that link, my Calendly link, which is a direct connect to my Outlook calendar. If you have any questions around either the RFQ process, or just want to know more about the DCSU, I encourage you to reach out to me. Next slide, please. And once again, I want to take this time to, on Mark's behalf and mine, to thank you. And Joanna, you did a great job on your presentation. I want to give you a shout out as well. At this point, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Kate.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We've got a big set of questions. Hopefully folks can stay on because I know that we're coming close on time, but these are some really great opportunity or questions that are here. So I'm just going to take them from the top. So some of these might have been answered, but you could just refer back to that if you believe that you've answered that. So the first one is, for buildings that must enter the compliance cycles, we're back thinking about the overall DOEE presentation on the BEP standards. For buildings that must enter the compliance cycle, has the city created relationships with financial institutions that would provide lending opportunities that are somewhat favorable to those business owners, particularly if you're considering sort of, and I don't know what MPO stands for, but MPO, I guess nonprofit organizations, to include houses of faith as well as individual landlords?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say our biggest partnership is with the DC Green Bank, which was set up in order to provide green loans in order to finance projects that are going to help the district meet its sustainability goals and specifically its energy reduction and greenhouse gas emission goals. So I would say the DC Green Bank is certainly our number one when it comes to financial assistance. And then, of course, all of these programs through the DC SEU, we received a lot of funding through the American Recoveries, or I always forget the acronym, the ARPA funds.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So we're certainly taking advantage of the moment and using those funds to help finance projects, especially for lower resource buildings. Obviously, the Retrofit Accelerator is just focused on affordable housing right now, but we don't know if, and we hope that with additional funding in the future, we can offer retrofit accelerators outside of just the affordable housing sector and provide that assistance to lower resource buildings, nonprofits, houses of worship, whoever might be in need of both financial and technical assistance.
So on affordable housing and with specific regard to public housing, do you know if the data regarding the compliance standards for public housing buildings will be available to the public? And if so, where would they acquire that?
Yeah, great question. All of our benchmarking and BEPS data is publicly available, both for our private buildings and for our public buildings. We are 100% focused on transparency. I can drop a link to the open data site where you can go and look at different BEPS or different buildings and whether or not they meet the BEPS. So if you have a specific building in mind, you can search for it by address or by building name, locate it, and our open data set will tell you whether or not it meets the BEPS, and also provide a bit more energy information about that building.
How old does a newly built building have to be subject to BEPS?
So our program covers all buildings that submitted or that were built before January 1st, 2021, when the BEPS started. So the BEPS period one technically started on Jan 1, 2021. And so if your building was built, December 31st of 2020 or before, you're covered by BEPS unless there's some kind of exemption, though for the building energy performance standards, the exemption criteria is quite strict. So we're kind of just saying, if you're a building over 50,000 square feet, built before 2021, the program applies to your building.
Do you know if property sales impacts BEPS compliance timing, if at all?
Great question. It doesn't impact the timing, though in our guidebook, we have outlined specific requirements for when sales occur in the middle of a compliance cycle for those buildings that are subject to BEPS. And it's basically a disclosure from the seller to the buyer that this building is subject to the BEPS, and also just providing information about, the pathway that's been selected, what's been done, basically just here's all the information you need to know when buying this building. And that is a specific requirement, and that DC also needs to receive a copy of that letter between the buyer and the seller so that we know that that information has been properly transferred. But it doesn't impact the timing of anything. It's just that there is a requirement to disclose the BEPS status of the building.
Well, And there are several more questions. These are great answers and these are great questions. If an individual company owns several buildings, whether they're residential, commercial, and they're all under 10,000 square feet, but are combined or over that, does BEPS apply to that owner and to the collection of businesses? Or, if it doesn't at this time, do you anticipate that the city might at some point make that a requirement?
So when we're looking at buildings, we're not looking at owners necessarily and their portfolios. We're looking at a building by building basis. So if you have 10 buildings in the district that are under 10,000 square feet and they are not connected in any way, in that you could pick up any building and put it anywhere else in the district, that building's never going to be covered by BEPS. If, on the other hand, you have a garden style apartment property that has 10 buildings and each of those buildings is, 5,000 square feet and they share a common energy or water meter, then in our view, that's one building, that's 50,000 square feet, and it's covered by both benchmarking and BEPS. So if anyone has any specific questions about how their buildings are laid out and connected and are unsure whether or not they're above or below the threshold, I do recommend that they reach out to DOE directly so we can make that final determination. But in terms of ownership structure, we're not looking at like, oh, this specific owner owns a total of 300,000 square feet of building in the district. It's really on a building by building basis.
Two more BEPS specific questions, and then we have some on the training opportunities. With regards to retrofitting, so if someone is retrofitting these buildings, how would they find out about the standards, or are there standards in place regarding the removal of old building materials to be a positive, not impact on the environment?
Oh, that's a really good question. Yeah, that's talking about that kind of like embodied carbon life cycle analysis. So right now, BEPS are a energy performance metric. We're just looking at your building and how much energy it's consuming and ensuring that you're reducing your energy consumption. But I will caveat and say that DOE is also required to do a study to determine whether or not we should transfer from an energy metric to a greenhouse gas metric. And that greenhouse gas metric might include the life cycle of building energy improvements. And so that might include the building embodied carbon of equipment that's removed or added. Right now we're in the actual looking at that phase. We don't have any plans right now, but it is possible that in the future we move from just a strict energy metric to a greenhouse gas metric. And of course, that'll be a big outreach campaign if that does happen.
I'm also going to drop in the link, and Joanna, I don't know if you were aware of this, but on my team's general technical assistance calendar, we actually have a representative from DOE who does all business topics. And so, if you're able to find the information that you need on the DOE website and connect with that person directly, that's a great place to go. If not, you can do a calendar meeting with Mary Lynn Wilhare on any green business topic. If she knows the answer, she'll let you know. If not, she'll do some research and get you connected to the right person at DOE. So
yeah, Mary Lynn's a great asset. So highly encourage people to take advantage of her knowledge.
And then the last link or last question on the BEPS, I think, affordable housing retrofit assistance. And I know that there was a discussion of the Accelerator, but if one goes through that process, do you know anything? Could you speak to what impact that might have on accounting for credits and appreciation and depreciation, or know where someone might look to find out more information about that?
That's a good question. I probably am not the best person to answer that question. We have some team members who work specifically on the Retrofit Accelerator. I'm involved, but not that deeply. We are looking at measures to protect the affordability status of buildings as they enter the Retrofit Accelerator. Of course, the last thing we would want to do is provide funding, make these buildings really great and efficient and healthier and safer and more livable, and then suddenly displace all of the residents because it becomes not affordable. So that's certainly something that we are thinking about and implementing as we go through the program. Some buildings are already protected by covenants, and that's great. And so that we don't have as much concern for those ones. Other ones we might look into, can we get some kind of agreement in place to establish a covenant or at least some kind of protections to preserve the affordability. I'm not sure about the credit question or part of the question. I don't know if that's what that was getting at.
Yeah, and I'll ask it slightly differently. And you know, we cannot, you know, DSLBD cannot provide any direct recommendations to for-profit service providers, and so I assume that's similar for DOE. I don't know if you have any awareness, however, whether it appears that folks who are in the accounting and tax accounting space seem to have taken notice of this space. You know, is that something where, you know, you've seen an uptick in people paying attention to that? I assume some people must because buildings are moving in that direction, but anything you can say to that?
Yeah, that I'm not sure about. You know, we have identified buildings as part of the Retrofit Accelerator. Like we have said, these are 100 buildings that we know don't meet the BEPS and are pretty positive are considered affordable, and have been doing a lot of engagement with those buildings. But we might also get other affordable housing buildings that we had not been aware of that come to us and we work with them. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not sure if that fully answers the question, but if you want to send that, I can pass it along to our team and see if we can get a more detailed answer.
Joanna, thank you for all of that. And then for our colleagues at DCSEU, I have 3 training questions and 1 contracting question. So the first training question, are energy management consultant companies eligible to enroll in courses? So, you know, companies that they're providing information to others, they're not necessarily doing the specific technical work.
So the short answer is it really depends on the status of the person who is applying. The tiered criteria that we have really focus on, you know, whether or not somebody's working for a district CBE as a CBE resident, or is, you know, DMV wide resident and is working in the industry. So yes is the short answer. I would encourage folks to take a look at the criteria, and if they meet the criteria, no matter what business that they're in, that they're eligible to apply.
Thank you. This next question, while it's on training, this also might be something that it's about government requirements. So we'll see if anyone has any inklings in this direction. Is anyone aware of the possibility of DCRA under the professional licensing standards requiring businesses to complete some of these or similar courses in order to maintain licensing registration? Are we seeing requirements come forward essentially that these types of trainings are required to maintain licensure?
So I think Joanna can maybe complete the list, but I know that there are some existing credentialing and certification requirements for doing both benchmarking and auditing as well. There's also third-party benchmarking data verification that actually already has a list of credentials that are required in order to be able to provide that service. We hope to be able to provide courses for nearly all of those certifications. Ones like PE or AIA are delivered by those respective organizations. We can't offer those, but for BPI, for energy auditing, certified energy manager, we will actually have those courses available, hopefully coming soon.
And I'll also just share, I put in the chat, you know, DCRA does have a green building division. They are not responsible for managing the professional licenses at DCRA, but they are the center of looking at green building at DCRA. So that might be a good place to start if you want to ask that question and see anything that they might be aware of if you wanted to look into that further. Okay, our last, this is actually just a suggestion that came in a good one, but the suggestion regarding training, and it could be any other outreach, but for Spanish language, it was suggested to consider reaching out to the DC Hispanic Chamber of Commerce to see if there could be some support and some outreach and engagement that way. We'll also at DSLBD take that into consideration. And the last one, which is regarding other opportunities. If one is not a contractor, can one still sign up for the contractor updates?
Yes, absolutely. It's a bit of a catch-all. You know, I think it really applies to anybody who's interested in providing services of any kind to the community, as well as those who are, you know, looking to get involved but are not yet part of the industry.
In addition to that, when you do go sign up, absolutely you can sign up for contractor updates. There are additional links to where you can sign up for information regarding residential and commercial specifically. So we have 3 e-blast type letters that go out on a frequent basis. Trades is really geared for contractors. However, anyone interested can certainly sign up. You might get spamogrammed a little bit as far as that goes, because we do send out e-blasts when we are soliciting, but it is good information. And especially if you're attending this this webinar, you have interest in this effort and this discussion. So certainly I encourage you to sign up for all 3.
Thank you to Rick, thank you to Mark, thank you to Joanna. Once again, this was the second in a 2-part series, and so we will be sending to everyone who registered a copy of the recordings from each, and then just so that you know, Joanna, there's been a request for these slides, so I'll follow up with that as well. This is part of the beginning of what we are calling CBE Green. We don't have that fully announced and fully out, but it is a lot of work by the Department of Small and Local Business Development to work with our partners at DOEE and DCSEU and to really be engaging the CBE community to understand both, the wonderful positive impact that these laws are having, but also the number of opportunities that it's really creating for our CBEs. As you heard someone say earlier, there are a lot of people internationally and nationally who are very interested in these opportunities, and so we want to make sure that we get people connected to the information, the training, and these opportunities for our DC businesses to be able to participate. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you for having us, Kate, and thank you everyone who joined.
Everyone, take care.